Blackjack, are we recording? Okay. Well, then I'll go ahead and get started. So hi everyone. My name is Soup. Get all of your jokes out now. Um, I am a Paragon Assassin from Kingdom of the Crystal Groves. I play at Rising Sun Station down in Alexandria, Virginia. Um, I got my Paragon just a couple months ago, actually, at Crystal Groves' Feast of Fools event in April. I've been playing for a little over a year, actually. I started in February of 2018. Uh, when I started, I kind of gravitated toward Assassin just because I'm edgy. No one I know will tell you that. Um, but I don't know. I liked the aspect of mobility and how a full speed game like ours translates that. Like obviously us as players have varying levels of agility, right? We don't have the agility of an actual like fantasy character in a video game or a tabletop RPG, right? So I was very curious how how this game would translate that archetype, I suppose. And I was pleasantly surprised. Um so I'm just going to go through the assassin kind of playbook here, just the class page and my thoughts on all the general information. I'll go through the levels, like I've seen done in a couple of other these Paragon Q&As. And then once I finish that, I will go through questions. And again, feel free to put in questions into the Discord. I will get to them after I finish my general spiel of information. So let me just pull up one more thing here. Okay. So first thing I want to talk about is our armor, shields, weapons, or proficiencies, as they would be called in anything else. First thing, I'll get to look the part last. I'm actually going to talk about our equipment first. So for armor, assassins can wear 2 points of armor. That is the second lowest armor rating besides none. And a lot of people shrug that off. I've seen a lot of people think, oh, 2 points of armor, it's not that important, you know. But when you really think about it, and when you really get those 2 points and start using it, you will see a drastic difference in your survivability throughout your lives. It might not seem like much, but 2 points can really mean the difference in a lot of different situations. I know that probably all of us have been in the situation where we're in Shadow Step and someone wants to release us and then just murder us, but we have a point of armor to use as a little buffer for an escape, right? And I'll get to that specific instance a little later. Um, but yeah, that survivability is that tiny bit of survivability can go a long way with any playstyle that you have. As far as what type of armor I recommend, I personally use and just swear by a shark mail tunic. Shark mail has the opinions on shark mail throughout the kingdoms are varying from what I've seen. But on every field that I've played on, it's been pretty consistently rated at 2 points, and it's my tunic, I think, is about 3 kilograms, which is extremely light, and I could wear it all day. So it's not going to tire you out like 6 point plate will, right? Or even regular chainmail. It's very light. It has no gaps, and it's very good. Um, as far as other types of armor, leather obviously is a good standby. I think a good pair of leather bracers, leather greaves will give you a long way, especially if you're dodging leg snipes and stuff like that. Um, but a good thing to remember when it comes to armor and weapons in general for assassin is weight. How much weight you are putting on yourself, how much weight you are carrying around with you, because we have to be mobile. We have to be on the move to utilize our kit. And if you have a lot of weight on you, like, yes, we can use all these weapons, but, and I'll get to that in a second, but that doesn't mean you have to keep all of them on you at the same time. You can bring them all out in the field so you can have options, but having them all on you at the same time, a bow, arrows, 2 swords, 4 heavy thrown, 10 light thrown, that gets cumbersome and that gets in the way. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind when figuring out how you want to play this class. Speaking of weapons, assassins can use dagger, short, long, light thrown, heavy thrown, and bow, and they cannot use shields, unfortunately. For weapons, my go-to personally is, my 2 points of armor, two short swords, two heavy thrown. If I'm just going straight up, I'm getting in the back lines, I'm flanking, I'm running around trying to get as many kills as possible and be a nuisance. uh, but I personally very much enjoy having a bow as well. When you talk about flow assassin, bow assassin, throw assassin, we have a lot of options in how we want to play this class. Where bow bow is actually kind of interesting for assassin, just because it's unique in how we get to use it, right? So obviously you have archers who have specialty arrows and they have their own place, and that's amazing. Scout complements A scout's bow complements the aesthetic really well, and can help them can help them fit whatever mold they need to. And druid obviously gets it to level 6, but for assassin, we get to utilize bow in a way that no one else gets to, and that's because we have our insubstantial abilities. The positioning power, and this is something I'm going to stress throughout this entire talk, that our positioning power as assassins is so strong, and it's your number one asset, because that's what insubstantial is. It's not a stealth mechanic, it's not a way to trick people, it's not a mind game, it's a positioning mechanic. And that's what I want to that's something that I really want to stress. And using that positioning mechanic for bow is very, very strong, because we can be everywhere, right? We have teleport, we have blink, we have shadow step to dodge quick attacks, and that complements bow really well. When it comes to other equipment, light thrown and heavy thrown, I actually saw a question about this before, of my preference. Yeah, up here, light thrown, heavy thrown, or both. I When I take heavy thrown, I usually only take two or three, actually, just for really quick opportunity. For when I'm using flow, I'll have a couple heavy throws on me, to use when the opportunity presents itself. With light thrown you can have a lot of fun with. I have tiny little pucks that I made out of thick pool, like that thick blue pool noodle filled with non-hardening caulk, wrapped in cloth tape, and those seem to throw really well. But the benefit of light thrown is just you get so many. You can carry so many and have a lot of fun with it, and just run around killing people with them. So that's the trade-off, size. But some light thrown designs will have weight as an expense. You actually kind of want a bit of weight in throwies, just because it'll give them it'll help them fly better. That's why I put non-hardening caulk inside mine. But heavy thrown, you get a little bit more size, you get a little bit more weight, and you can distribute that weight more evenly, and consistently, and they can, in my experience, heavy thrown tend to be a little more accurate. Of course, like other light thrown options, gamma balls wrapped in cloth tape, it's also a valid option. Our rules give a lot of options for how we can make those work. Oh, I do not want to open Steam. Okay, so weapons. Dagger. Dagger is fun. I personally haven't used much. I haven't found much success in using just two daggers. I know that some people like to do that, especially as an aesthetic choice. I find the best use for a dagger is as a surprise. For example, I wear a black tunic normally, and I have a completely black dagger. I keep the dagger on my side to the back, and sometimes people won't know I have any weapons, but I have a dagger, and I can catch them by surprise. That's obviously a pretty fun way to use the dagger, and that's what we're all here for, is fun, and also to kill people. Anyway, so for abilities. Level 1 assassin gets Shadow Step and Assassinate. I'll talk about Assassinate first because Insubstantial is confusing. Assassinate is one of your bread and butter abilities. It's what gives us our name, obviously. You get it an unlimited amount of times, and that is the most important thing about it. It has an unlimited range. It is extraordinary. You do not have to have an open hand to cast. It is naturally ambulant. You can cast it while moving. And it has a range of 20 feet. As long as you get a kill, as long as you kill someone and they are within 20 feet of you, you can assassinate them. Assassinate will curse the target. And some people, as we all know, cursed means immune to spirit magic. And some of us write off the curse state as, oh, they can't be rezzed. But it's not just that. It's they can't be rezzed. They can't be, a warrior can't use True Grit. That's also a spirit ability. Someone can't cast Steal Life or Sever Spirit on that person. Those are all spirit-based abilities that target dead players. And obviously Resurrect. And Summon Dead. They can't use Summon Dead either. However, it is worth noting that healed, yes, but we wouldn't heal a dead player. Because for Assassinate, yes, you can be cursed while alive, but if you're cursed via Assassinate, you will always be dead while cursed. That's just the nature of the ability. Something that I want to note about specifically healers dealing with the curse state is that it's not as big as the curse state actually isn't that big of a deal as a lot of people think for healers. Typically every healer will have Greater Release on their list, right? Greater Release can release the curse state, and it's something to note. The only thing but it will block a couple of other abilities before that. Summon, like I said, Summon Dead, Sever Spirit, Resurrect, Steal Life Essence, right? Something else that's important about the curse state and those abilities in particular is that sometimes it's actually beneficial for you not to assassinate a target, for you not to curse a target. A lot of people say, oh, say assassinate every single time, no matter what. However, there are a couple very niche instances that it's actually more beneficial not to. And that is specifically for an instance where one of your allies wants to cast an ability on a dead enemy player. Specifically, the ones that come to mind are Steal Life Essence and Sever Spirit. They're both spirit-based. No, sorry. Steal Life Essence is a death ability, but it still can't target dead players. It says that specifically in Steal Life Essence. However, say you have an allied wizard or curse players. You say you have an ally wizard or healer, right? They have an ability they want to charge, or they're wounded. You kill someone, you assassinate them. They can't cast Steal Life on there. They're still wounded. They still are without that ability. They need charge. So you have that. If you have that good communication with your teammates, you can say, okay, I'm going to kill that player. Do you need to Steal Life them or something? Do you need something, right? And if you have that tiny level of communication, you can benefit your team a lot by just not doing something, which is kind of interesting. Sever Spirit, on the other hand, is say there's a player with a persistent enchantment, right? Sever Spirit will curse the player, and it will remove any persistent enchantments that player has. So say they have persistent pro, for example. That's a moderately scary enchantment. It's moderately high dispel worthy enchantment. So it'd be a good target for Sever Spirit. Granted, I don't see Sever Spirit on a lot of lists, but nonetheless. As that's kind of my general spiel about Assassinate. Say it every time, but there are a couple instances where it might be beneficial not to, and it's important to know those instances. And also know exactly what abilities that will prevent that can't be cast on a cursed player while they're dead. Know what Assassinate prevents. Don't just know what it does, right? Shadow Step. Excuse me, get a drink of water. Shadow Step is our first insubstantial ability. We also get it at level 1. We can use it twice per life. It is extraordinary and ambulant, just like Assassinate, so we do not have to have an opening to cast it, and we can move it while initially casting. Shadow Step is, like I said, our first insubstantial ability, and insubstantial is the most complicated state in the game. You will find the information of insubstantial on page 52 of the ROP. And I always like to make the joke that, like, oh yeah, frozen, this tiny little this the sentence of what frozen is: stopped, player cannot move their feet; stunned, tiny little sentence of what stun does. Insubstantial, huge paragraph of multiple lines. Um so I'm actually going to go through all of them, these 13 rules that we should all know as assassins. Just so I'm going to go through them real quick, and then say a couple of share a couple thoughts about the state in general afterwards, because it is our number one tool in the assassin toolbox. Number one, insubstantial players may not move from their starting location unless otherwise noted. Insubstantial players are incapable of physically interacting with game items, objectives, or other players in any way unless otherwise noted. Insubstantial players can only be affected by mechanics that work on states in general, such as release, or insubstantial in specific, such as dimensional rift. Player and their equipment are otherwise unaffected by combat, magic, etc. Are unaffected or stopped by game terrain, such as walls, lava pits, traps, etc., unless otherwise noted by a reeve or game designer. May be seen and heard, may see and hear, may charge abilities, may use magic and abilities on themselves if the magic and abilities are able to affect insubstantial players, may remove this state from from themselves at any time by incanting, quote, "I return to the physical world," unquote, ×2, provided they are the cause of the state, and entered it voluntarily. Otherwise, they must end the state as per the description of the responsible magical ability. Insubstantial triggered from enchantments worn is not considered voluntary. The ending incantation for insubstantial is not interrupted by a player moving their feet. Must indicate their insubstantial state by saying insubstantial if asked, attacked, or targeted by a magic or ability. May not delay game excessively. For instance, you may not use the insubstantial state to avoid being killed if you are the last player alive in a mutual annihilation battle game. The Reeve's decision in these situations are final. Now, I know what you're saying. Soup, why are you going through all of this? We already know that. Because it's extremely important to know. And it's very, 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 very important to know exactly the rules of insubstantial, so you know how not to confuse people, because that is the number one problem with insubstantial, is that it is confusing. If you are not clear with your insubstantial status, then you will cause confusion on the battlefield, and you will make things not fun for people. And that's something that I really want to avoid. That's something that we all should want to avoid. And there are a couple things in substantial that I want to specifically talk about. One is rule number one: may not move from their starting location unless otherwise noted. It's important to note that moving from your starting location is different from moving your feet. The stopped state says player may not move their feet. Insubstantial says may not move from their starting location unless otherwise noted. That's particular. I mean, it's not a huge difference, but it's worth noting, just because if you're insubstantial via shadow step, right, you can't move while you are insubstantial with the shadow step ability at all. You cannot move from your starting location, but you can move your feet. You can shift, you can pivot, you can look around. If someone has their hand on their back, on your back, wanting to cast release on you, you can turn around and put your sword up to their chest. That's also, but as long as you're not moving from that location, you're still on that point on the battlefield, but you're just facing a different way, right? Rule 5 and 6: may be seen and heard, may see and hear, or may be seen and heard, and may be seen and heard, may see and hear. I can talk, I promise. These two rules are just here to clarify that it's not a stealth mechanic. We do not have a stealth mechanic in Amtgard, and it should not be treated as such. Again, your state should be clear, whether you are insubstantial or not insubstantial. That status of yours can be clear. The best assassins will be crystal clear with their status of insubstantial or not insubstantial. Because we're not using it for stealth, we're using it to reposition, like I've said. Rule number 11. This one has caused a little experience. The ending incantation for insubstantial is not interrupted by a player moving their feet. An argument that I have heard time and time again is that this rule in particular overrides rule 1, and people will say that it essentially makes it so that you can move while saying the exit incant or the return incantation. I return to the physical world. I return to the physical world for Shadow Step, and that's not true. The reason being is that while Shadow Step, that rule isn't in place to grant movement while it's not in place to specifically grant movement while you are insubstantial for the ending incantation. It's in place to allow to make it so that movement can continue, right? So if that, because the return incantation for insubstantial is part of insubstantial itself and not part of the ability, it doesn't take on the properties of the ability. So yes, blink is ambulant, but that doesn't mean you can say the return incantation while moving. But this rule makes it so that you can. And that's why that rule is in place, to allow movement to continue for blink and teleport specifically. Like if that rule wasn't in place, you would teleport to a point, stop, say, I return to the physical world, I return to the physical world, and then you are no longer insubstantial. But in reality, you can keep moving and say, I return to the physical world, I return to the physical world, because you can end your own insubstantial state on teleport early. That's why that rule is in place, and that's something that I wanted to clarify. Shadow Step in particular, so this is kind of a nerdy comparison, but I kind of picture Shadow Step in my mind as like, as far as like intended use goes, as kind of like, or at least what I like consider it as an intended use. It's kind of like the after image thing that they do in like anime, like Dragon Ball Z, right? So like where someone will like kick Goku and it'll just like go through him and it'll be like his after image, and then Goku will like come and like hit the person, right? So Shadow Step, in my humble opinion, is meant to be a quick dodge, right? Someone throws a spell ball at you, a barbarian's coming in with Fight After Death, right? They're coming at you, they're throwing something at you, someone shoots an arrow at you. I step into the shadows. You dodge it. I return to the physical world, I return to the physical world. You keep moving. So no one, you keep moving, because that's the name of the game, is movement, and continuing your rampage, I guess. Shadow Step can also be used as just kind of like a breather kind of thing. You go in insubstantial, you take up your surroundings, you figure out what's around you, you plan, and then you act, right? That's also a very important thing about insubstantial, is that we are given that safety, we are given that state to utilize as not only a repositioning tool but also a recon tool for ourselves. Analyze, plan, act, right? And we have that time, we have that state to figure that out. What enemies are around me, who can get me out of this state, and I'll get to that a little later. Who has what ability, what abilities have they used already, what does that druid have on their list that I've heard so far, right? We can use that safety net of insubstantial to plan around our attack. And I think that's really special. Poison. So our level 2 ability is poison for ourselves only. It's also our look the part ability. The only difference between our look the part ability, poison, and our level 2 ability for poison is that one is not chargeable and one is chargeable. So how that would work, it's what I works out in my experience is it's 2 separate frequencies. Right? So normally if you have a look the part ability that's once per life, and you have the ability itself that's once per life, it would add up to twice per life. But our look the part ability is not chargeable. So it's once per life, and once per life charge times 3. So effectively it works out the same way, but we just need to think about it in that way. So you use a look the part of, you use poison, right? You use it again, and then you charge it, right? And you have to have the instance used in order for it to be charged again, and also and that's kind of how it's the most effective way to do it anyway. You're out of the battle, you spawn, right? I coat these weapons with deadly poison, they coat these weapons with deadly poison. you. Oh, sorry. What confusion was there on teleport? You can end at any time while traveling to your location. That's what I. That's sorry. I must have said something different. Um, the what I was saying is that if Rule 11 wasn't there, if that specific rule of insubstantial wasn't in place, then that's what would have to happen. But in reality, what we are allowed to do with teleport is, you're moving, or you say the initial incantation, you start moving, and then at any time between you beginning teleport and you getting to your chosen location, you can say, "I return to the physical world. I return to the physical world," while moving, and keep going. Teleport isn't the ability that's chargeable. Poison is the ability that's chargeable. Um, does that answer the restriction, or does the confusion on teleport? Okay, perfect. Sorry. um, okay. Let's see. Where was it? Poison. So I'm going to talk about the ability itself. Poison is one of our strongest offensive abilities, right? It gives us very frequent wounds kill potential. Um, Having it such a high frequency, and especially having it chargeable at such a low charge at charge times 3, we can almost always have it on with especially on planned one-on-one fights, right? Um, I cook this up as deadly poison. I cook this up as deadly poison. You are now wounds kill as long as you have the red strip on you. Any wound that you get, any wound that you give to a player will kill them. Um, with that in particular, it's important to utilize gaps in people's armor. It's important to think about what kind of equipment they have. If they have flow, if they have shield, and if they have a shield, and how to plan around that. If they have projectiles that they have that can get to you before you can get to them. As long as you get a wound off first, or a wound at all, you're pretty. You're it's very easy for you to win that trade, as it were. Um, um, the other thing about poison, you can charge it while insubstantial. That's also a really important thing to know. If you're just chilling in insubstantial, if you're planning, you're thinking about your next move, make sure your poison is charged. That's always super simple. It's also extraordinary, so it doesn't count towards your enchantment limits, which is also important to keep in mind. All right, I'm going to go through the next couple abilities a little quicker, just so I can get to a couple questions that I've seen pop up. Blink twice per life. Just all of your insubstantial abilities are twice per life and extraordinary. They do not have to have an open hand to cast. Blink is a great escape option. It's a great escape option for safety. Someone's coming at you. I vanish from sight. You have an amazing radius. You have a very large radius of movement in order to escape whatever sticky situation you might be in. I like to say that Blink is your teleport is your engage tool, and Blink is your safety net. And that's because Blink has a proximity limitation on it of 10 feet. You cannot be within 10 feet of a living enemy and exit insubstantial. You have to be outside of that. So it's keeping in mind your positioning towards other enemies and your starting point is very important. Hold person is kind of forgotten in some instances. It's a very necessary form of crowd control that I think is very good for assassins. I'm grateful for it. Once per life magical. You need to have an open hand to cast it. Um, uh, Keeping in mind who you can cast it on is always important. Obviously you can't cast it on monks. Obviously you can't cast it on barbarians. But keeping in mind who has a response to it, and if you have a response to it afterwards, right? Like, are you just gonna stop the warrior and forget him while he shakes it off, or are you going to have a response to it and get a gap snipe on one of his on through his armor, right? Think about what you're doing. In particular, with people who can release themselves from that state, from the stop state, it's also important to keep in mind your follow up. Healers, scouts, druids, bards, and wizards can all release themselves and pretty much immediately from stopped if they have that on their list. Uh, Healers will almost always have it on their list. Um, so stop the healer. Yeah, they're going to release them. How are you, then what? What's your next play? It's important to keep your options in mind, and not just throw out your abilities willy-nilly, but have a plan and have a response to whatever you're doing. Teleport, again, I apologize for the confusion earlier. Teleport is an amazing engage tool for us. We get it twice per life at level 5. Again, extraordinary, but it is not naturally ambulent, unlike Shadow Step and not hold person, Shadow Step and Blink. The incant's a bit longer. It's I travel through the ether times 5. It's not a single incant like Shadow Step and Blink are. But for teleport in particular, it's important to note what the stages of the ability and how your status, as far as insubstantial and non-insubstantial goes, relates to your movement and and also the phase of the ability, right? So imagine there are there are 5 stages to pretty much any ability, right? There, or specifically insubstantial abilities. There's before you cast it, there's casting the ability, there's being under the effects of the ability, there's returning from it, and there's after you've cast it, right? So while you're casting it, you're not insubstantial and you're stationary. This is for teleport. While you're under the effects of it, you are moving as directly as possible to whatever location that you chose. And then at any point between your starting point and your location that you chose, you can end the effects of teleport yourself, because specifically teleport says if the player's insubstantial state is removed before they have reached their destination, the effects of teleport end. That is for other people, and that is also for you, and it's very important to know it's for you. That's why typically when I'm teleporting, I'll pick the farthest, most possible destination in any given direction that I want to move, like the boundary, right? And I know that I can end my state between wherever I started and that boundary. And why I say it's a great engage tool is because, one, it has that initial longer incant, but also it does not have that proximity location. So nothing's stopping you from teleporting directly behind someone, as long, or right next to someone, right? And getting the drop on them. That's it for the insubstantial abilities. Basically, I just want people to know that it's very important to be crystal clear about your status, because confusion on field is the worst. It's just not fun. It's not fun for anyone. And insubstantial positioning tool, all that kind of stuff. Understanding your position, understanding the ability's relation to the state itself and movement, and your movement restriction, as well as the status in where the ability is, like during the incantation, during the return incantation, under the effect. Keep all those things in mind and how they relate to one another. Finally, coup de grace, in my opinion, one of the most stylish abilities in the game. Super fun. Deshel Comfy. There's not a whole lot to cover. There's a couple things, though. It is magical. You have to have an open hand to cast coup de grace. It is a death verbal. It has a range of 20 feet. It has to be cast on a wounded player. And if you start casting coup de grace on them and they are healed before you finish casting coup de grace on them, they still die. And that is probably the most important thing about it. It's very, very, very fun. It's also important. It can be followed up with assassinate. Deshel Comfy, assassinate. They both have a range of 20 feet. If you can cast coup de grace on someone, you can cast assassinate on them. Okay, I'll shut up about specifics and my general spiel about Assassin. I would love to answer some questions from y'all. So I will start at the top. Bows versus throwies. Good, go. Oh, that's not the first one, but I'll answer it first anyway. Bows versus throwies. I prefer archery just because I think it's more fun personally. I think you can have a lot more accuracy over a lot longer range. Opinion on the difficulty of earning Paragon as a primary bow assassin. Is it possible? Any tips would be much appreciated. Oh, that's a fun question. So throughout my journey of trying to get Paragon, I did play primarily bow assassin, and that play style is kind of what got me noticed. Um, well, part of what got me noticed. It's what I excel at personally. I am better. I know that I am a better bow assassin than I am, just with throwies or just with two swords. I know that about myself, and that's okay. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, or things that they are better at than others. But as far as is it possible to only play bow assassin and get Paragon, I don't think so. I think a Paragon needs to be able to at least be proficient in every aspect of their class. That's being able to use every single weapon, especially for martial classes, because that's all we got. Being able to utilize armor effectively, being able to use every weapon effectively, and being able to, but at the same time, being effective in the way that you want to be effective. I think a good way to get noticed, at least as far as getting Paragon goes, is have options. What I do is I take multiple options out on field. I take my arrows and I take two swords. Maybe I'll leave one sword at base. Maybe I'll take off my quiver and I'll put it back on, or take off my bow or drop my bow and pick it back up whenever I need it, whenever I think it'll benefit me more than just melee. So knowing how to adapt to the situation is very important. Um, da, 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 da. What do we have next? Can you walk through a shield wall, supposing the enemies were shoulder to shoulder? That I would leave. Like, we can sit here and talk about how the specific rules work all day. Technically, yes, I think you should be able to, but not in a way that disrupts things and makes things unsafe. Right? Like if you're at a multi-kingdom event like Keep or something, and you're just want to walk through a shield wall, yes, you technically can do that, but it's very, very uncool to use that as a way to make an opening for your team, right? That's not fun, and that's not safe. It's not safe to just go barreling through people just because you can. Um, Specifically, I think that's a call that a Reeve should make, because it'll vary from field to field for that particular instance. So while my specific answer would be technically yes, but just from the nature of our game, any answer that is technically yes is a probably not, or probably shouldn't, at least. Let's see. I'm trying to find another question. A lot of talking about my. Another question about insubstantial. I was told that people cannot stay beside you if you're in sub, like they have to pretend you're not there. Is that true? That is not true. Insubstantial is not a stealth mechanic, like I stated well, this was probably posted before I stated that, but rules 5 and 6 of insubstantial state may be seen and heard and may see and hear. There is no stealth mechanic or anything like that. Warrior seems like a hard stop against assassins. Are there any other classes that are just really hard to handle? That's an amazing question. Classes that are hard to handle. Warrior, it depends. Obviously, if they're wearing 6 points of armor, that kind of sucks, just because we have no way of dealing with armor, besides finding a gap and using poison. They're a great target for coup de grace, because it will kill them, it will curse them, they won't be using True Grit and coming back. Hold person is a bit meh for warriors, just because they can usually shake it off. Just keeping in mind where you stand and like what abilities they can use, and having a response is the best case for warrior. Picking them off but little by little with throwies or arrows is also a thing, but nothing is better than just getting help from a teammate. That's the strongest ability for anyone. But in general, yes, I would say warriors are one of the harder classes against assassins. As far as other classes go, any class that can use one of the 7 abilities that can target an insubstantial player, any class that can use banish, tracking, technically release, greater release, Planar Grounding, Dimensional Rift, or Dispel Magic. Any classes that have those abilities, which are Scout, Druid, Healer, Bard, and Wizard, um, are stuff to watch out for. They can't. Not all of them can use all those abilities. Like Wizard specifically has Planar Grounding, Coup de Grace, and Release, and Dispel Magic. I'm not Coup de Grace, Dimensional Rift. That's what I meant. Just keeping in mind who have those abilities and how those work. Oh, and I don't remember if I said Banish. Keeping in mind who can cast those abilities on you. Let's see. As far as other classes go, I would say the scariest class to me as an assassin is probably a wizard, just because they have planar grounding. I would rather be dimensional rifted than planar grounding personally, because I know that they probably don't have more than 1 or 2 dimensional rifts. So once they use them, typically the threat's probably gone. With planar grounding, that opens you up to more CC that can take you out of the game longer. Dimensional Rift, yeah, you're dead probably for just 30 seconds with unlimited lives, and you're back depending on the game. With planar grounding, you can't go insubstantial anymore. Someone ice balls you, you're gone for 60 seconds. So that's what I would be more scared necessarily isn't the right word, but something that I would want to watch out for. Barbarian, as far as Blackstock said, Barbarian is the biggest pain. The only thing that pops out with Barbarian is their potential for armor and blessing against wounds. But something that's important to note about blessing against wounds is that because it prevents the wound from happening, poison doesn't get expended. It literally makes it so that a wound doesn't or immune to command. It literally makes it so a wound doesn't happen. If a wound doesn't happen, then poison doesn't expend. So you just hit them again, and it still wounds kill. That is different from immune to death that a paladin would have, for example. If you hit someone that is immune to death, poison will be expended, and but they will still deal the wound. Poison will be expended, and it won't be wounds kill. Speaking of paladins are rude against assassins. They don't pop up much, but they're immune to death and command, and that's just mean. They're immune to poison, assassinate, coup de grace, and hold person, and they have the potential to wear armor. Those are all things that are very bad against assassins. Barbarians, yes, they are immune to command, therefore immune to hold person. Which is another figuring out who you can cast what on is very important. How do I pick my targets? I think about what class they're playing. That is my number one thing. I think about what class they're playing. If I know them well enough, I think about what level they are. I pay attention for casters. I pay attention to what their lists are, and I pay attention to how people are moving around the battlefield. I think about, are they aggressive? Are they laying back? Is the archer repositioning themselves a lot? Are they staying in one place? That's obviously easier on a park at a park level where you know people a lot, where you know a lot of people very closely. But for kingdom or multi-kingdom or traveling to a different kingdom, those skills can still transfer. It just takes a little bit of being observant. The best advice I can give when it comes to that is just understand classes and their abilities. Obviously, that's knowledge is power, right? Know what abilities you can't cast on. Know what schools certain abilities are. Find the pattern. Find the tells that abilities have, especially for new players. This is super important. If you figure that out, if you figure out, okay, this spell has command in it, it's definitely command, or this spell is one of these 4 types of spell balls, it's definitely subdual. It's one of the most powerful things for a new player, especially. I try to never under any circumstances engage my targets in melee from front. Is there any situation where straight up squaring up to someone of equal or greater melee capacity is viable? That's a good question. Um, I guess my only advice for that is realize how much armor they have. Make sure they're clear about their armor and their enchantments and know exactly what you're going up against. If they're another assassin, make sure you get your poison off first. Know if your poison will work at all. Make sure your poison is consistently charged because wounds kill is such a strong tool. Um, as far as like straight on squaring up against someone, know how to fight against multiple styles. Find the differences between and someone who's better at fighting can help you with this more than I can. But know how to best fight against pole. Know when you're using flow, for example. Know how fighting against pole differs from fighting against flow versus fighting against single short or sword and board, right? And specifically, what are your best options when you have wounds kill? Should you go for the leg? Should you go for the leg? Should you go for the arm? If are what are they covering? What are they? What are their patterns? If you can figure out their patterns, you can figure out how to kill them. And that's really the only advice I can give for that. Uh, do people have more questions? Did I miss anything? I guess something I can mention is because I just came into my mind is enchantments. Um, some good enchantments for assassin, in my opinion, the best one is void touched. It's ridiculous because you armor breaking, steel life unlimited, shadow life once per refresh charge times 30, um, and unaffected by magic from sorcery, death, and spirit, which is very fun. The reason why I like it so much is that it specifically clarifies unaffected by magic from the sorcery school, right? The reason why that's good is that if you were just immune to sorcery, like from adaptive protection, for example, you wouldn't be able to use your in-sub abilities because they are also sorcery, but they are also not magical. If you are specifically unaffected by magic from the sorcery school, then you are unaffected by greater release, dimensional rift, planar grounding, also spirit, so banish, a bunch of these abilities that can take you out of insub or kill you while insub. Um, Actually, the only thing that could take you out of insub at that point would be a scout's tracking, because yes, it's sorcery, but it's also extraordinary. Dispel magic would still work against you though, because dispel magic will be able to target a player no matter what, unless they're dead. So I don't remember if you answered this, but did you aim for Paragon Assassin or did it just come to you? I was on the warpath. I really wanted Paragon, and Master Thrash was my mentor down in CG. He was a great mentor to me. But what I found worked for me as far as getting noticed and getting Paragon was making it obvious that I wanted it, because no one's gonna know to talk to. Find the people to talk to, right? Like yes, be humble, but understand that nothing, like, I guess just try to be verbal, be aware of your presence, right? And be humble, be kind. That's what people notice more than anything. Yes, your fighting prowess is there. It has to be. Um, uh, Teach, right? That's what personally I think I strive in most, and what I enjoy the most is teaching, especially new players, making sure people understand your class, how to play it safely, how to play it effectively, how to play it safely, um, is extremely important. What's your favorite soup? I see my favorite soup every time I look in the mirror. That's probably a cop out, but that's all you're gonna get out of me. Um, the coolest thing I've ever done as an assassin. Oh. There was a time at my park when we were playing a game with a tunnel in the middle of the field. So like a wall probably 50 feet long, horizontal across the field, perpendicular to respawns, and well, imagine just two lines in the middle of a field dividing it. And they're walls, but insubstantial, can go through walls. So I just kind of remember using a combination of blink, shadow step, and teleport to go one way, back the other way, down the back the other way, through these walls in every possible combination, and getting a couple kills along the way. I think that's really fun because it was like a travel ether, travel ether, travel ether, a travel ether, travel ether, teleporting. I should have this world. I vanished from sight. Go over here, travel this world, kill someone, blah 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 blah. And it was really fun. Go chaining your insubstantial abilities together like that is pretty fun. Uh, not to self thumbnail soup booking into. Please do. Well, does anyone have any more questions? Any last minute stuff they want to ask? Because I think I'm about good. If you have anything you want to ask or get off your chest, speak now. Where'd you get your shark mail? I will find that link right now. I got it at Ringmesh, and I got it right here. Ringmesh.com. Super great. I recommend the short sleeve chainmail tunic. It is about 3 kilograms in weight. Very, very nice. That's what I use almost every time I play Assassin. It's really hot outside. So it's probably been asked a billion times, but why soup? On my first day at park, so before my first day at park, I asked my friend Zuno, who just recently got Paragon Barbarian also. He's a good friend of mine, and I asked him what would be like, but this is like before I even knew what this whole thing was. Like I was just like really curious about it, right? And then I hadn't even gone to park for the first time. And I asked him, so what would be like a good power move, show up one day, I'm doing this. It's like, oh man, this girl's crazy. And he said, and we settled on bringing food. And I was like, God, but yeah, anyone can bring food, but what would be like a ridiculous thing for me to bring? So I made a huge pot of ham and potato soup, and I brought a fold-out table and a camping stove to keep it warm, and cups and utensils and stuff, and I served people soup on a cold February afternoon. It was hilarious. And it just kind of stuck. What's your opinion on suggestions on fighting Flow Assassin? I assume you mean fighting as Flow Assassin. 2 points of armor, two swords, 2 heavy thrown as a little option. That's kind of my go-to, or at least my thoughts when it comes to that. Keep in mind your options. Fighting Flow Flow, in my opinion, is one of the most awkward fighting styles. Just because it's not, I don't know. It takes a while to click for a lot of people. Keep in mind of what shots can leave you open. But Flow, just like with any fighting style that Assassin has, is very, very complementary to your positioning tools. Flow gives you a lot of offensive capabilities and a lot of opportunities to apply your poison. So if you teleport into a teleport behind a line or reposition, you are already a threat because you're breaking a line. You're keeping attention to you, and you're a threat because you are most likely going to kill someone if you know what you're doing. So I guess I hope that answers your question. Well, I guess that's all I got. Blackjack, are we good to kill the recording?